most haunted city in America. Start off here. A violent start. It was 1718 when our founder, Jean-Baptiste Lemoyne Serre Bienville. I'm sorry, I don't speak French, but I'm trying. Anyways, Bienville sailed down the Mississippi River and settled in New Orleans. He was accompanied by soldiers and expeditioners from Canada and France. So he did what anyone might do. He penned the King of France and requested that the crown send some folks across the Atlantic. The king acquiesced, but he did so on his own terms. In 1721, he opened all the prison doors of Paris and put them on a ship, heading for New Orleans. The convicts were the lowest of society: thieves, pickpockets, rapists, and murderers. Then Bienville needed appropriate brides for his colonists, and the first group of prospective women recruited hailed from Paris's House of Correction, a lot of which were prostitutes. The early colony of New Orleans struggled under the weight of debauchery and crime, where bursts of violence were not uncommon. Those same convicts rapidly began to fill our old parish prison, but even after they were publicly executed for their crimes, their souls never left the prison. Other prisoners heard disembodied screams from areas of the jail that no one was in. The sounds of iron clanking woke them even in the dead of night. Guards began reporting that they saw shadows of ghostly figures roaming the cells and corridors, and some grew so frightened by the dead convicts, more so than they feared the living, that they up and quit. When the parish prison closed, it still had 350 prisoners still locked inside of those walls. It's fair to say that the ghosts of those early colonists, especially those who ended up imprisoned before facing their execution, have opted to never leave the city they found themselves in centuries ago. So, all that I can say is that you know it's creepy when there's even a legit haunted cell. Alright, the American plague. It arrived in the form of infected mosquitoes, but resulted in the deaths of thousands of people. Yellow fever was the true killer of New Orleanians during the 18th and 19th centuries. After drinking the diseased water, people's temperatures spiked and their liver, infested with a fever, shut down. Skin turned a sickly yellow, and the whites of their eyes matched the jaundiced flesh to perfection. It was only a matter of days until the body could no longer support its own and succumbed to the disease. With no known cure, grave drivers could only collect the dead off the streets and haul them to the cemeteries, most of the bodies at any rate. Some were unfortunate enough to be brought to places like what is now the Pharmacy Museum. Today, the Pharmacy Museum is rumored to be one of the most haunted locations in New Orleans. They say this about everything, I'm just being honest. It was during these epidemics that pharmacist Dr. Joseph Dupas used the deadly yellow fever victims as decoys for the women alive. mandated that burials be elevated as above-ground tombs or mausoleums. If strolling through the dead is not enough, the fact that generations upon generations can fit into one single crypt should be enough to send chills running down your spine. Yellow fever epidemics posed a deadly problem, however, for in the span of one summer, thousands of the victims could be waiting to be interred within the city's limited tomb space. And if the thought of the dead waiting to be buried doesn't unnerve you, the fact that the voodoo queen Marie Laveau's spirit still haunts St. Louis Cemetery number 1 just might. Her ghost is said to lurk by her tomb for visitors who disrespect her or her religion or beliefs. The ghost of Maria has been known to hit, scratch, and push people down to the ground. Marie Laveau may not be the friendliest of spirits, and she's only just one of the ghosts rumored to haunt St. Louis Cemetery. Number 1, the oldest grave site in New Orleans. She was actually really helpful to people, so I don't know. Take this all with a grain of salt and believe whatever you want. The Great Fires, Good Friday of 1788. Treasurer Jose Nunez was sitting in his family's home on Rue Chartres, less than a block away from St. Louis Church, now Cathedral. He allegedly lit 56 candles in honor of the holiday, and then sat down for dinner with his family. Then the scent of smoke curled through the house. The candles had caught fire upon the curtains. That night, on March 21st, 1788, 856 buildings of the 1,110 in the French Quarter caught fire and burned to the ground. The Spanish governor Esteban Miro wrote, "If the imagination could describe what our senses enable us to feel from sight and touch, reason itself would recoil in horror, and it is no easy matter to say whether the sight of an entire city in flames was more horrible to behold than the suffering and pitiable condition in which everyone was involved." With nowhere to return, locals camped out in Jackson Square, Plaza de Armas, which just so happened to be the place where public executions were held every single week. Allegedly, these executions did not stop during the time the homeless New Orleanians stayed there. Ooh, that sounds nasty. And rumor has it that the stories of hearing disembodied voices screaming and spotting ghostly figures in Jackson Square started then. Today, Jackson Square remains just as paranormally active as it was. The Great Fire of 1788 ravaged the city, and public executions amassed hundreds of New Orleanians to watch each and every week. Orbs have been caught on camera in Jackson Square, and apparitions have been visibly spotted. Are these ghosts which haunt Jackson Square the victims of execution, or the restless souls who lost their lives in the devastating fire? Though the locals spent the next 6 years rebuilding, another fire in 1794 destroyed another 200 buildings. Where there is lost life and despair, well, ghosts are not far behind. New Orleans as a port town. It's no secret that port towns are often the most crime-ridden and violent-laden areas in a state. Portland, for example, is known for its Old Town and Shanghai tunnels, where unsuspecting folks were kidnapped out of saloons, dragged through the underground tunnels to the waterfront, and then sold to sea captains. New Orleans is no different. Back in the 1800s, the closest street to the waterfront was Gallatin Street, and it was known as the most dangerous street in the world. Legend has it that if you could make it past Gallatin, you could make it anywhere. Ramshackle buildings hung loose on their foundations. Gangs, such as the Live Oak, were so slick that their victims never knew their throats had been slashed until they were already dead on the ground. Prostitutes, some missing limbs or teeth, lured was a little bit weirdly worded. Okay. Whether it's due to culture or just weird